Appreciate everyone being here, and for those at home, I know we have several committee members joining us via WebEx, so we will look forward to their participation via WebEx. So committee, today we have a hearing on two bills, Senate Bill 48 and 78. We will open the hearing on Senate Bill 48 with an overview from our reviser, Tamara Lawrence.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good afternoon, committee. You should have access to a memorandum from the revisor's office on the details of this bill. But before I speak to the details of the bill, I do want to point out on page 3, the stricken and italic materials on lines 2 through 11, even though it looks new, is actually already law. This statute was amended twice last year, which created a conflict. And so even though it looks new, this is old language. This is just curing that conflict that we were unable to cure last year when the statute was amended twice. So I did just want to point that out. So Senate Bill 48 would amend KSA 725170 regarding school district accreditation. Currently, the State Board of Education is required to design and adopt a school district accreditation system. That system is the Kansas Education Systems Accreditation Model, or KESA. This bill would provide that in order to accomplish the constitutional mandate of intellectual, educational, vocational, and scientific improvement, the accreditation system is to require conclusive, measurable evidence of improvement in student academic performance. And annually, beginning July 1 of 2026, school districts would have to demonstrate material improvement in student academic performance from the preceding year, evidenced by a decrease in the number of students scoring at level 1 on the state assessments and an increase in the number of students scoring above level 2. Additionally, the state board would be required to set required performance improvement targets for school districts. Senate Bill 48 would also require school districts and schools to be in compliance with all applicable federal and state statutes and rules and regulations. Any school district or school not in compliance would be notified by the state board. That notice would identify the nature and extent of the non-compliance and provide a deadline to correct the non-compliance. Failure to do so would result in loss of accreditation, and the state board would establish a due process procedure for challenges to determination of compliance. Senate Bill 48 would also require that whenever the state board determines that a school district has failed to meet accreditation requirements, that the Board of Education of the school district would have to address those deficiencies, including, if applicable, reallocation of school district resources to remedy those. The bill would take effect on July 1 upon publication in the statute book, and I'll be happy to answer questions.
Thank you very much. Committee, what questions do we have for the reviser? Seeing none, thank you. We will then turn to proponent testimony, and we have Mike O'Neill, Kansas Policy Institute, and we will give conferees 3 minutes. Thank you. Welcome to committee.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So we've talked a little bit this week about what local boards can do with their ability needs assessments to improve student performance. This talks about what the state board can do to improve that, because we know that we need to take some dramatic steps to improve student performance outcomes in the state of Kansas. And just a little bit of background, the reason why the state board has the authority for setting accreditation is statutory. It's not constitutional. Article 6, Section 2 of the Constitution states or includes language that says the state board shall perform such other duties as may be prescribed by law. This is one of those. And that started in 1968, the same year that the quote-unquote new education article was passed by the voters. And that was originally 6439. There's since been a recodification, and those statute numbers have since changed. But if you look at my link there, the current statute is KSA 72255, which sets forth the what we would call the mission of the state board. That would include the requirement for creating an accreditation system for the schools. and also things like teacher certification. The bill we're talking about, or the statute we're talking about now, is 7251-770, which is specifically the requirement of the board to establish a design and adopt a school district accreditation system based on improvement in performance and is measurable. And that's what we respectfully suggest is lacking in the history of the accreditation statute and its implementation by the state board. In fact, the attachment, I would invite you to peruse the attachments where Commissioner Randy Watson gave a very candid, frankly, assessment of the accreditation history, and it's a sad story of neglect. We know that they are working on KESA 2.0. You may hear that, hey, you don't need to do anything. KESA 2.0 is already up and going. Well, that's partially true, but they have yet to decide on the parameters and the metrics for measuring success and measuring whether a school needs to be accredited or not. And I would remind the committee that this is a legislative function that has been delegated to the board. That statute has been amended from time to time, and this would just be the latest amendment to that statute, giving the state board direction. If you look at the regs, and that's something that we seldom look at, if you look at the published regulations on accreditation by the state board, it states that to be accredited, you have to be in good standing, and good standing means in compliance with or working with the state board to be in compliance with all applicable federal and state statutes and regulations. It also requires that the education system provide conclusive evidence of improvement. Am I out of time?
You are out of
All right.
time, Mr.
I will stand for questions at the appropriate time.
It is the appropriate time. I will draw the committee's attention to proponent written from Ward Cassidy, Executive Director of Kansas School Board Resource Center. So what questions does the committee have for the proponent? Are there any online from committee members? We'll go with Senator Murphy, then Senator Argabright.
Thank you, Chairman. Mike, what other way would there be to measure improvement? Do you know?
What other way?
Yeah.
Well, our state assessments, our NAEP scores, there's any number of metrics that we've been looking at. All of them are rather disappointing in terms of academic outcomes. So I know that KSD likes to measure high school graduation. I would respectfully suggest that that is not an appropriate metric for what the kids are actually learning, because if you take a look at the numbers of graduation rates, they're going up. Student performance outcomes on testing are actually going down. We have way too many kids in level 1. One of the things this bill does is actually, or one of the things that we're wanting is for, let's not talk just about percentages, let's talk about the numbers of kids that are not in level, that can't get out of level 1. And we have individuals that suggest they never will, and that, I suggest, is a very sad commentary. All of those kids can get out, with very few exceptions. With severely disabled kids, all kids can learn.
Okay, thank you.
Senator Argabright.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mike, thank you. My question is just a little different direction, but on the same lines as the good senator beside me. This appears to only focus on academics. Is that accurate?
Well, yes, it does, because that's what the Kansas Constitution requires, is for the legislature to develop an education system based on improvement. And the statute on accreditation is based upon improvement in performance and is measurable. And measurable is the key here, because there are few things that we can measure, but we can measure student performance on the assessments that are required. So, I understand that there are other ways that kids can excel, but the prime thing that we want to look at is are they meeting the benchmarks that we expect, such that when they get into high school, they're not years behind.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will not argue the importance of academics. I don't know that anyone will. I know there's other pieces too, so I just appreciate the clarity. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Committee, other questions? Any online? Seeing none, thank you so much for
Thank you, Madam
being here
Chair.
and for your testimony. Committee, we will now turn to opponent testimony. We have Leah Fleiter, Assistant Executive Director of Advocacy for the Kansas Association of School Boards. Welcome back to committee. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Appreciate that. I'll try not to take 3 minutes. You have my brief written testimony in front of you. You can see that we have several points of opposition to this bill, including constitutional concerns, and so you can read that. And we do want to focus, too, on page 2 of the bill, which talks about being not in compliance. It seems to us that this is pretty vague and somewhat unworkable. You know, who determines what in compliance with a law or a regulation or a rule, what that means? And we also would actually, I have to turn to the 2 retired superintendents on this committee. You know, if a district's accreditation is challenged because they didn't dot an I or cross a T on a local regulation, let's just say, you have high school seniors who are getting ready to walk across the stage. And, you know, high school graduation is a pride point in our local communities because it prepares our kids for success. They just found out that the college that accepted them is now rejecting them because suddenly they have a diploma from an unaccredited school. So, oh, that's not the timer. So, you know, that's obviously something that we need to focus on. And so, you know, first of all, I have to come back to this continued focus on high school graduation. We know that high school graduation prepares kids for success. You know, you get your wages are automatically higher when you have a high school diploma, and that as your education increases, then your degree of financial success increases as well. So we know that those high school graduations that are such a pride point for our local communities are very important. And at the end of the day, and to close my testimony, I would just respectfully suggest that the legislature focus on the real work of supporting public schools and, you know, perhaps fully funding special education to help all Kansas kids, and reject this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Committee, next we have on WebEx, Mary Sinclair, Kansas PTA Advocacy Team. Mary, are you with us?
I am, Madam Chair. Thank you for having me back.
Yes, you have 3 minutes.
Okay. On behalf of the Kansas PTA, we respectfully oppose Senate Bill 48. This bill asserts a harmful approach to school accreditation that uses a high-stakes punitive approach that unnecessarily threatens to invalidate essentially the diploma of every high school senior, really at any given time. The lack, and particularly the lack of specificity for the trigger for that would strip any district of accreditation could make this legislation really vulnerable to weaponization. Kansas Association of School Boards and local school districts routinely monitor changes in state laws and regulations and craft policies and procedures to remain in compliance. These 280 plus superintendents and nearly 3,000 elected board members are intentional about remaining in compliance with state law. Further, the Kansas State Board of Education is our educational authority for accreditation and should kind of remain in their hands under the guidance of our educational professionals at the State Board of Education. Nearly 90% of all Kansas students and parents choose the public schools. Parents want our districts to be supported and empowered to create opportunities for all children to be successful. This includes adequate funding for general education and special education to create those opportunities for our students. So at this point, I would say, our K-12 public education educators really rose to the challenge for decades long, living with decades of deep cuts to general education funding while they were kind of waiting for the return of that purchasing power in the school budgets under the Gannon Agreement. Our educators rose to the challenge of a global pandemic. We ask that you recognize that 2023 is the new baseline. Let's monitor our progress from 23 and support our public schools to ensure all Kansas kids have equal opportunity to achieve and allow our departments of education to continue to support our school districts. And I urge you to vote no on this bill. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Committee, next we have Kathy Hopkins and Danny Zeck, Kansas State School Board of Education. I believe they are on WebEx. Kathy and Danny, are you there?
I'm here. Am I, okay, are we good? Okay,
We're good.
thank you.
We can see you and hear you. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Vice Chair, and committee members. Thank you for this opportunity. I do come before you today as the State Board Legislative Liaison and the newly elected Board Chair. And while we could obviously argue the constitutional authority on both sides, I don't think that argument produces good results. And I don't think taking up sides and throwing rocks at each other gets anything accomplished. So I really am here to just say that one of the things, to speak for me and for the board, that one of the things I focused on when I took my oath of office and my seat at the board table was accreditation. It was something I knew I would dig into as quickly as possible to understand and see how I could work at implementing changes. As I joined at the board table, I quickly met the final phase of the first KISA model, and during this time, the final layer of concrete was laid on my resolve to see change implemented. Thankfully, I learned that the new Deputy Commissioner of Learning Services was leading the charge to see vast change in this area. However, I was skeptical and watchful, along with other fellow board members, as a different version began to be unfolded to the board. The new process began to take shape, but we delayed the requested full approval of KISA 2.0 and continued to have the plan brought before us month after month as it was continuing to be developed to ensure we agreed with what was being proposed. As this was happening, I personally went to every meeting that I could to ensure that I understood what was happening and the intent of the proposed new processes. I have now attended also what we call the School Improvement Day, where 3 to 4 like districts come together for a day to look at data and collaborate on what action steps they can implement and measure to make the most difference for their district, their educators, and their students. Looking at outcomes doesn't change outcomes. Looking at adult behavior and what is being input is what makes a difference and changes those outcomes. Getting away from layers of reporting and getting to supporting districts is what we can give school districts the ability to focus, collaborate, and implement changes. This is another aspect of KISA 2.0, and the work is ongoing and will continue to be as we watch carefully and stay alert as it continues to play out with the school districts and KSDE. The desire to work with and not at opposition with the legislature is real. And I believe I speak for the board as well when I say we want to find ways and times to meet, discuss, and work together to do what is right for Kansas students and their families, and also for educators, our classroom teachers, as they need the right resources and support. Without them, we lose completely. I am asking for the committee to pause this bill and allow us the opportunity for small group discussions, a free flow of ideas, and so we can show all our constituents that education is important enough for us to do what it takes to work together. I genuinely thank you for your time. I personally will be in Topeka Monday and can make myself available to anyone who would like to speak with me in person from about 10 to 3. And I'm staying over after our state board meeting and will be available all day Thursday to do the same. I also want to say, if I have time, to Senator Erickson and Thomas, I truly am sorry I have not managed to reach out to you directly. Since becoming chair, it's been a little bit of a whirlwind, grabbing hold of the edit things that I have to do now. But I do thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for your testimony. Committee, I do want to draw your attention to opponent written testimony. I can never say Kelly's last name. Kelly Bielfeld, the superintendent of 259. Ben Jones for Kansans for Excellence in Education. Timothy Graham, Director of Government Relations and Legislative Affairs for KNEA, and Dr. Tanya Merrigan, Superintendent of Blue Valley Schools. So I encourage you to look at their testimony. And with that, we will open it up for questions for the opponents. What questions do we have, committee? Senator Gossage.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This can be from, we'll go back to, was that Kathy that was on WebEx? Okay. If Kathy Hopkins, can you hear me?
Kathy, are you there? Oh, there she is.
There she is. Hi. I think that, I'm a former classroom teacher, and as a teacher, sometimes you get students in your 6th grade classroom that are reading on a 2nd grade level when they come to you. You do everything you possibly can to help take them as far as you can throughout that year. And often schools find the same thing. I remember when the Kansas City, Missouri schools, don't know if they still are, but they were unaccredited for several years, trying to get caught up and get students up to grade level. So what would you recommend? I understand this legislation trying to say, let's hold schools accountable for something. We can continue to say, yep, we have 30% of kids that can't read, but, we're doing the best we can. What would you think? What would you say as far as holding schools accountable?
Kathy, I think you're muted. I think you're muted. We cannot hear you. I'm sorry, we still can't hear you. We'll try to get that. Wait a few more seconds.
Bless her heart, I've been there. You're
I'm
trying to
sorry,
be on a
Kathy,
Zoom call, and I don't know why you can't hear me.
We will try to get a response or
All right.
try back here, but are there other questions for the opponents? Senator Murphy.
Probably kind of along the same line, but I guess we're seeing a failure, and everybody knows there's shortcomings. And like you said, how do you hold people accountable? How do you move forward? What does it take to, the cattle prod? I'm a farmer. But does anybody want to answer? I mean, there's accountability. I know lots of times when I'm having meetings with, in districts and things like that, everybody talks like everything's just going wonderful. But we've got, 40% of the kids that go to college are taking remedial courses to get caught up. That doesn't sound like it's wonderful. And so I guess, if this isn't the answer, we need an answer. And I guess I'm looking for ideas. Nobody? Okay.
Okay.
Can you hear me now, Senator?
Is that Kathy?
Kathy.
We can if you would like to respond to Senator Gossage's question. Thank you.
I will try after all of my trying to figure out what happened. All I can do is point forward. I've been on the board for 2 years. I am very passionate about seeing changes implemented. The at-risk list is one of the things before us, even in this upcoming meeting, and I'm personally working very hard on things that we can do on the reading level. Literacy is obviously the absolute foundation for everything. And that's where I'm pouring so much into right now. So we're trying to make sure that we are truly giving the resources and tools to our teachers to meet every need in that area, because without the reading, obviously everybody loses. So we must have that in hand. And so I can say, as the board chair, that is the leadership I'm stepping into, to be able to truly just push as hard as we can and run like a freight train to do the best we can to get the educators what they need. Because I believe that's where we have to focus. The educators have to have the tools they need and the resources and the knowledge to give those kids everything they need every day. I hope that helps.
Senator Petty. Senator Petty?
Yeah.
Okay, we can hear you now.
Oh, you can? You can hear me now?
Yes, we can. Please
Okay.
proceed.
All right. I'm would say I can't make my video work from this end. I think for some reason it's locked out. And it was on earlier, so I'm just saying that to technology there. This is a question for, well, I'll go back to Kathy Hopkins from the state board. When you mentioned about meeting with school districts, and when you look at within this bill, it talks about non-accreditation. When the State Board of Education talks to school districts, do you just look at one measurement when it comes to looking at accreditation?
Kathy?
No, we don't. I mean, there's compliance, there's school improvement, and then there are outcomes. There is a whole, layering to all of that and working it through the collaboration and the school improvement days as a part of the accreditation with the new KISA. We're truly looking for that ability for districts to even help each other with ideas and different ways of doing things, different ways of looking at data, different things that they can do to collaborate together. Sometimes, especially I'm in District 5, that's my district, so it's a lot of, Western Kansas and rural districts, and they don't have that opportunity very often. So we're looking at ways to best help them work amongst each other and work together. And KSDE has made a very real stand in supporting districts in every way possible. And that's what I'm seeing today. And again, I don't have all the history, I know, but that's my push forward, to see all of those things implemented as best as we can.
And just as a follow-up, Madam Chair, Kathy, I know within this bill, it says demonstrate material improvement in student achievement performance. Do you know what that means?
Kathy?
Well, in demonstrating improvement, that a part of the model is very much about action plans and measures of progress, so that we can have very real defined ways for each district. And every district is different in what their needs are. So that's the push in that area, to have those real defined plans that they measure and have in place measurements that they are looking at on a constant basis to move forward and have those. And it's very much built on the 4 fundamentals. So I'm going to put those out there of the structured literacy, balanced assessments, high quality instruction materials, and standards alignment. So that's the foundation. And then the structures within for every district to be able to move those things forward. So I hope that helps.
Thank you.
Senator Shane?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. And thank you, conferees, and thank you for the discussion, especially regarding, thoughts on tracking improvement and how we manage this difficult topic moving forward. I do have one question for Ms. Fleiter regarding the testimony that you wrote about the concerns about the statements on being in compliance or non-compliance with applicable federal and state statutes and rules. Could you expound on the concerns there, and what might you think would be appropriate mechanisms to help ensure that our school districts are indeed following state and federal law?
Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Madam Chair. So thank you for that question. Our concern is that a single person or a single entity could challenge the compliance with little or no actual evidence to back that up. That this could be done as kind of as a punitive measure to try to settle a score, or to, if someone is upset about something the school district did, like, I didn't like the pizza that they served at lunch. I mean, that's frivolous, but let's just use that as an example. And then, they're going to get up and challenge accreditation. So I would say, based on the conversation that Chair Hopkins just had with the committee, it's pretty clear that there are robust measurements in place through KISA 2.0. There are also robust accountability measures in place with the Kansas State Department of Education, with local authorities. And so we are confident that our school districts are doing the very best they can, and they work very hard to be in compliance. And our concern is really with some of these frivolous things that we might see. Like, I think we're all familiar with the term frivolous lawsuit. So this would be kind of similar to that, a frivolous challenge to accreditation. Is that helpful?
Senator Shane? Okay, now we can't hear you. We can't hear you, Senator.
He's struck silent by my eloquence. No, I'm sorry.
I don't know what it is when we come back.
I know,
we lose sound. We will see if we can
Can you
get
hear me now?
Now we got you. Now we got you.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Okay. I'm going to blame it on the IT department. Is that fair? No.
No.
That's not nice. Okay. So.
Oh, no.
I'm so sorry we lost you again. Yeah. Okay, I think you're
how
back.
about now?
Now we got you.
Yeah, I'm being told that the host or co-host is muting and unmuting me. So, as a follow-on to that, what mechanisms might you suggest that we do ensure compliance? We know that we have some legislative post audits that have found that spending of at-risk funds has not been in compliance with state statute, and there have been instances where school districts are maybe not following state statute. What mechanisms would you suggest would be appropriate in those instances, or are there things that are in place today to help ensure compliance?
Well, I would say that the post audit, I think it's a little bit problematic because school districts were following the guidance that they were given by the Kansas State Department of Education, right? And so they were trying to comply with the law, and they were trying to do so by following the guidance that was posted on the State Department of Education site. So it's unfortunate that that's been mischaracterized as not complying with the law. I think in some cases, some of those items that were in the audit were flagged that, it's probably was something that was very well intentioned. Like if someone bought some, I think we talk about supplies for an after prom party or something like that. Sometimes those people say, well, we're going to have this event so that kids are safe after the prom, or that, we're going to set up this activity to help at-risk kids, and so we're going to buy some of the supplies from that. So sometimes it's just well-intentioned, but shouldn't have been coded that way. I think what the legislature really could do is make sure that it is fully funding the at-risk programs that are in place, and that you are giving local districts the flexibility that they need to respond to the local conditions with their at-risk students. And in last year, Senate Bill 387, there was a real push to limit how those funds were spent. And there was, unfortunately, a very cynical design to make sure that after about 3 years, nobody could reach those targets, and school districts would actually lose their at-risk funding. So I think the best thing the legislature could do is make sure that it is actually funding at-risk programs and making sure that local districts have the flexibility to address that. Is that helpful?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm gonna wrap up with a few questions, and then we'll move on to our second hearing. Because I've heard a lot being talked about here. So in the opponent testimony, there's a lot about constitutional role and responsibility. And we started our committee with an overview of that. And so I just want to pose to whoever would like to answer it. If you look at Article 6, Section 1, it says, quote, "The legislature shall provide for intellectual, educational, vocational, and scientific improvement by establishing and maintaining public schools, educational institutions, and related activities, which may be organized and changed in such manner as may be provided by law." So my question is, because I'm hearing loud and clear, we've got a robust accreditation system in place. We're doing it. We've got it. You guys just pipe down about anything having to do with student achievement. My question is, in light of what the legislature's constitutional duty is, what would you suggest we do if not say we need to see measurable student academic outcomes? Is that outside the constitutional duty of the legislature? And is it too much to ask that we make sure schools are helping students grow academically? Whoever would like to take that.
I actually will jump in if I can, Senator. Can you hear me?
Yes, just a moment. We have Mr. O'Neill, and then we'll go to you, Ms. Hopkins.
Okay.
And there's a reason when you look at the education article that there's over 900 statutes. The legislature, through Article 2 of the Constitution, has the authority to enact legislation. And the Constitution gives the legislature the authority to oversee educational improvement. And as I mentioned earlier, the reason the state board has accreditation is a statutory delegation of the legislative power. And through the Constitution that says that the board shall perform such other duties as may be required by law. This is a cooperative effort. This isn't a us versus them type of thing. It should be a cooperative effort. But to say that the legislature has no role in this would be absolutely wrong. It's not what the law is, and it's not what the law contemplates.
Ms. Hopkins?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Are you hearing me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Perfect. And actually, I'll pick up on Mr. O'Neill's words, should be cooperative. That's what I'm asking for, is that we do a better job. And we own our part as well, that we do a better job to truly work together, so that when there is legislation needed, that it's something that we are all standing together in. That's all. I mean, that's one of my biggest parts of this. I really want us to see, so we're not at hostility, so that we're truly working together for the education of our students in Kansas.
Yes, Ms. Flyer. Please come forward. You're fine.
Thank you. I really appreciate Chair Hopkins' comments. You know, it's true, we need to be working together on this, and I think her idea of an in-person small group meeting next week is a great idea. I would say one thing that the legislature could do through Article 6 is make sure that you are carrying out your constitutional responsibility to fully fund. So that would be my only comment.
I appreciate that, and according to the governor and every other source of Gannon, we are fully funding our public schools, make no mistake. Ms. Hopkins, I would like to ask you in regard to your response, I couldn't agree more. We need to work together. But from your written testimony, you say that what we are doing with this bill is, quote, it derogates the State Board of Education's constitutional authority. Would you please show me in the Constitution where accreditation is, if you would, please?
And I don't have that before me, Senator, and I truly don't want to have that oppositional stance. Accreditation is in the law. Well, I guess what I'm asking for on behalf of the board is that we are allowed to take this new venture forward and see if what we can do to keep supporting schools, do a better job of supporting schools, and work out this framework that has been put into place with the new KISA project, with the fundamentals, taking a closer, more lasered look at what needs to happen, and have that less reporting and more straightforward approach. That's why I have liked the new model. It's very much works for me there. So I really don't want to argue the constitutional part. I'm not a constitutional attorney. Obviously, the legislature has their role. We do have a state board of education, and so part of it's, letting us continue to walk this out is my request today.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I was quoting from your written testimony.
I know, and I apologize for that.
I just wanted to point that out.
I
A couple
appreciate
other
that.
quick things. Okay, thank you. I do have a couple of other things to address that was mentioned in testimony. As far as compliance, I think this was Ms. Flyter. So according to ks.gov, there is a definition of compliance that I don't think would lend itself to the frivolous nature that you alluded to. And I quote from ks.gov, compliance as it relates to accreditation. Compliance means the state or active fulfilling official requirements, statutes, and regulations. In KISA, compliance is a prerequisite for receiving an accreditation rating from the state board. In good standing means in compliance or actively working to achieve compliance. So I'm not sure the confusion. I think we all know that to be in compliance with law means you're following it and obeying the law. So can you please address
Thank
that
you.
definition?
I think if the committee would be amenable to this, we would suggest an amendment to kind of clarify that in the text of the bill, to talk about, in compliance means, and then cite the statute about accreditation and what that involves, because that would help us, and it would probably help other people as well. So thank you for that question.
Senator Gossage.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Flair, I'm thinking about something that you said earlier that I felt to be offensive, and that is you mentioned that the legislature would pass something with sinister intent. Did you really mean that?
I'm sorry, what did I say?
There was a piece of legislation that you felt had sinister intent.
Thankfully, the conference committee report did not reflect this, but Senate Bill 387, as it was being hammered out in conference, did include the provisions of a bill. The number is escaping me, House Bill 26 something from last year, that talked about accountability for at-risk programs. And it set up some almost impossible goals that school districts with large numbers of at-risk students would be almost unable to meet in the time frame that was set forward. And so as a result, it would have pretty much guaranteed that these school districts with high numbers of at-risk students who need, our very best effort would fail to meet those benchmarks, and then they would, through the provisions of that bill that was folded into this conference committee report, they would lose their at-risk funding if they could not comply with an almost unreachable goal. So I agree that probably sounds very offensive. I did not write the legislation.
And again, one does not know someone's intent who did write the legislation. And so I think just to say it had sinister intent perhaps is the wrong use of wordage. To say the result may be that there might be an impossible goal to reach is one thing, but to say sinister intent I think has gone too far.
I would respectfully say I don't think I said sinister, but if you think I did, then I will stand down.
You did.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And last question, Senator Argerbright.
More of a comment, Madam Chair, thank you. And I feel like Senator Murray over here never had an answer to his question, so I just want to respond real quick. The nice thing is we're all about the same thing, and that's moving our kids forward. I guess the question is, what should that goal be? And I don't think there's a classroom teacher that will argue about in fact, they'll probably set goals higher than some of you in this room. The reality is when they walk into a classroom, and you could pick your age and your grade, you walk into a classroom of 25 or more kids, and they're all over the place at their level. And their priority is growth to answer some of these questions. And measuring growth with that goal up above there is where they want to go. And so with all due respect, the professionalism of teaching, that's the real part of that. Walking into that classroom and how do I move 25 kids that are all over the place with academic performance? And there's variables that the why of that that play into that too, that a teacher can't control, but they're trying. So I hope that helps a little bit of part of the question. it is important to have high academic standards. I don't think anybody will argue that. But growth is really important for every child. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you for those comments. And I just want to make it abundantly clear, because let's not confuse making sure that our students are successful with denigrating teachers. If not for our dedicated teachers in the classroom, I'd hate to think what shape we would be in. So this is by no way a statement against our effective, hardworking teachers, and to suggest that anything that's said in regards to we want to see our students be successful is a complete mischaracterization of anything that this committee does. If anything, we need to make sure we're giving our teachers more resources, more support, and the number one complaint I hear all the time from my educator friends are, I'm leaving the profession not because of the challenges of the difficulty of the kids I have in my classroom, because I'm not supported by administration. And I think that needs to be priority number one, is supporting our teachers, because as our teachers go, so go our students. So I just want to make sure that that is clear. Committee, thank you so much for the conversation and the testimony on this bill. We will close the hearing for SB 48 and move on quickly to SB 78. And we will open that hearing with an overview from our reviser, Tamara Lawrence.
Thank you, Madam Chair. SB 78 would establish a new section of law to require that the governing body of post-secondary educational institutions regularly review and update the institution's policies and practices on accreditation. By the end of this year, the governing body would be required to identify accrediting agencies or associations that are recognized by the United States Department of Education that are eligible to accredit the institution, and update the institution's policies and practices to ensure that the institution may pursue accreditation by any agency or association that is appropriate. The bill would prohibit those accrediting agencies or associations from compelling post-secondary educational institutions to violate the law. Any adverse action taken by an accrediting agency or association against an institution for complying with the law would be a violation of this section. If an institution is negatively affected by that violation, they could bring a civil action against the accrediting agency or association. If that does happen, the institution would be required to notify the legislature in writing within 30 days. As used in the Act, post-secondary educational institution would include state educational institutions, the municipal university, and private post-secondary educational institutions that are subject to the Kansas Private and Out-of-State Post-Secondary Educational Institution Act. The bill would take effect on July 1, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, committee. What questions do we have for the reviser? Any online? Seeing none, thank you very much. We will turn to proponent testimony. We have Paige Terryberry, Visiting Fellow, Opportunity Solutions Project, I believe on WebEx. Paige, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
You have 3 minutes.
Wonderful. Thank you. Good afternoon, Chairwoman Erickson and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to be here and encourage support for Senate Bill 78. My name is Paige Terryberry. I'm a Visiting Fellow at Opportunity Solutions Project. Kansas is home to many highly ranked colleges and universities, and students from Kansas, as well as those from out of state, come here to receive a quality education. Schools here, just like everywhere in our country, are dependent on approval from accreditors. Accredited colleges and universities are widely accepted as legitimate. Losing one's accreditation status is a death sentence both reputationally and financially. This is how accreditors act as gatekeepers to indispensable Title IV funding, making them immensely powerful. And unfortunately, accreditors too often use this power to interfere in schools' governance and push radical ideological standards. On top of this, they neglect their duty to ensure academic quality. Here are a few examples. In 2022, an accreditor threatened Florida State University's accreditation status because of who they were considering for university president. In another recent case, an accreditor publicly meddled in UNC Chapel Hill's plans to establish a program focused on thought diversity. In Georgia, an accreditor threatened the federal funding of every public higher education institution in the state over a potential appointment of the state's former governor. In another instance, a California university received a notice of concern from their accreditor telling them that they must further develop a campus-wide DEI vision. The accreditor removed the notice only after the school implemented that policy. Though none of these examples are from Kansas, Kansas could be next. Notice how none of these examples involve education or student outcomes. These examples are about power and governance. A Harvard Business School study found that in less than 3% of cases, accreditors acted against a higher education institution when it concerned poor outcomes for students. This is wrong, and real problems like college tuition skyrocketing, student debt, and degree completion rates are being overlooked. Federal funds should certainly flow to legitimate institutions only, but by giving the power of the purse to unaccountable entities, accreditors have wielded authority that they should not possess. The good news is that states can push back. This bill provides a simple two-part solution. First, it gives Kansas's colleges and universities the opportunity to shop around. And second, it empowers schools to hold accreditors accountable. Allowing colleges to freely pursue accreditation from any federally recognized accrediting agency dismantles the monopoly stranglehold that accreditors have, and it gives schools the autonomy to choose an accreditor that aligns with their specific needs and unique missions. Other states have done this. Today, Florida, North Carolina, Tennessee, and West Virginia allow colleges to choose their accreditor instead of being forced to work with their regional one. Kansas should follow suit. Second, Senate Bill 78 gives Kansas colleges room to push back on accreditors if they are negatively affected by retaliatory action. And the bill requests that colleges notify the state legislature of any related violation. No school in Kansas should be subject to ideological oppression to serve its students, and no school should be told how to manage its own governance by an accreditor. This bill empowers Kansas educators and brings rightful accountability to the accreditation process. Opportunity Solutions Project is pleased to offer our support for this legislation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Committee, next we have Michael Brickman, Education Policy Director and Senior Fellow for Cicero Action. Are you there, Michael?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Welcome to committee. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I will be as quick as I can. I want to thank you for having me here today. And I think Paige did an excellent job of highlighting some of the reasons for this bill. There have been many problems in other states. Fortunately, in 2019, the federal government changed its regulations with respect to accreditation to stop recognizing the system of regional monopolies that accreditors had held for decades. Accreditors previously were the only entities, a single accreditor could be the only entity that Kansas colleges and universities could seek for Title IV recognition and eligibility. As Paige correctly outlined, if you lose your accreditation, you lose access to Title IV, and that is usually a death sentence for any college or university, including a public. This bill does not force the colleges and university of the state to change anything. It really just removes a flexibility to conform with the flexibilities that have now been given by the federal government to allow for the existing accreditor monopolies to go away, to allow for states and the colleges within them to shop around for different accreditors. And this has enabled additional accreditors to launch for the first time. We're seeing several new accreditors that public institutions in Florida, North Carolina, and others, Texas, are considering. But again, there's no requirement to change anything as a result of this bill. There's simply the opportunity to potentially switch accreditors. There are just a couple of things, though, that I would mention that I think could be improved in the text of this bill. The first is that while there is an affirmative signal that a college or university can shop around, there are still explicit mentions in the state statute, including in Chapter 74, Article 32, Section 120. And there are other examples, that's just one. And in those areas of Kansas statute, the names of specific accreditors are mentioned. I would strongly encourage the committee to revise the bill to just simply make that language neutral so that the institutions have full freedom and flexibility to make a change if they so choose. The committee may also consider not just looking at the institutional accreditors, but also the accreditors that accredit individual programs in medicine, in law, and in other places where you might like to see greater opportunity for choice in the future. Thank you for your time. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Committee, that concludes our proponent testimony. What questions do we have? Senator Gossage.
Thank you, and this is for either of you. I guess I wasn't aware that this was even an issue, but do we know in the state of Kansas, the accrediting board for the majority of our colleges and universities? Is it one accreditation board, or are there several?
Yeah, the Higher Learning Commission is the accreditor that had historically had the regional monopoly over the state of Kansas and most of the Midwest. And some institutions are looking at switching, but this is still early days. And so as of right now, vast majority of institutions in the state of Kansas, including, I believe, all of the public institutions, are accredited by the Higher Learning Commission. And there are, as I said, a few mentions of the Higher Learning Commission in statute as of right now.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator Petty.
And
Senator, we can't hear you. We'll keep trying on our end. If you can check your end.
mindset.
Senator, I'm so sorry, we can.
You can hear me now?
Okay, I think so. Keep talking.
Okay, so I will say, and I know we're running out of time here, this certainly looks like a bill in search of a problem. So I'm going to ask Michael, and this will be a simple answer. Have any institutions of...
I'm sorry, Senator, I couldn't hear that question. I just heard my name.
Senator, you started out strong and then you faded and we lost you. We could not hear your question. I'm so sorry. We'll try for the next few minutes. If we can't get you, then we will get your answer from Michael, but it may not be at this moment. So are there other questions in the meantime? Any online? Okay, seeing none. Committee, we have no opponent testimony. We do have neutral written from Blake Flanders, President and CEO of the Kansas Board of Regents. And Senator Petty, we'll try one more time. Are you there? I'm sorry, Senator, it is not working, but we will get you an answer to your question. Committee, with that, we will close the hearing on Senate Bill 78. We will be meeting on Monday in the same room, and we will be hearing Senate Bill 76. And come prepared to work bills next week. We're going to be kicking them out right and left. So come prepared. With that, seeing no other business before this committee, go Chiefs, and we are adjourned.